discuss about the Eastern Mediterranean and its role in the future energy market. In the midst of energy crisis, fundamental questions are being asked about natural gas and how can supply be assured now and in the future, and at what price. Amid this crisis, one region has emerged as a promising new gas source for Europe, the Eastern Mediterranean, and especially Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus. So here with our distinguished guests, we are going to discuss about the role of this area in the future energy market. We have with us Mrs. Juul Jørgensen, Ditte, Director General for Energy to European Commission, Mr. Vladimir Malinov, Executive Director of Bulgartranz, Mr. Osama Mobarez, Secretary General of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, Kostis Sifnaios, Vice President and Managing Director of GASTRADE, and Mr. Nikos Tsafos, Chief Energy Advisor to the Prime Minister. So let's start with Mr. Mobarez. And please, Mr. Mobarez, tell us about the work that East Med Gas Forum has done in order to help support and Mr. Pyatt, I forgot you. I can see you, yes, here you are. And of course, Mr. Pyatt. Mr. Pyatt, Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources in the United States. Good evening, Mr. Pyatt, and thank you that you are with us. And let's start from you, as I did that mistake, so we start from you. Just a bit change, a small change. Mr. Pyatt, tell us your opinion about East Med gas area. Yeah, you think that East Med area could supply gas in the gas market in a way to help the energy security of Europe?
Yeah. Thank you, Marina. And thank you to all the friends.
Now?
Are we okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Great. Thank you, Marina. It's wonderful to see so many friends there. I count it a personal tragedy that I'm not with you in Delphi. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world, but delighted to have this opportunity to share a couple of thoughts. Let me first say how important the U.S. partnership with Europe on these issues has been, and it's terrific that you have my colleague, Ditte Jørgensen there. Rita and I were together in Brussels a couple of weeks ago for a very positive US-EU Energy Council meeting that really highlighted, I think, the Biden administration's ironclad commitment to our transatlantic relationship and the energy security aspects of that, and all the areas that we're working together. One of those regions where we're working together is the Eastern Mediterranean. I think it's really important, and I'm glad to see Director General Mobarez there, because from an American perspective, we see the Eastern Mediterranean as a region of great opportunity. We have a number of American companies that have made significant commercial commitments to their upstream gas exploration activities in the East Med region. But we're also very excited about something that Ditte and I have spent a lot of time working together on over the past year, which is the energy transition in the Eastern Mediterranean. The tremendous renewable resources that Egypt and other countries of the East Med possess, the opportunities for more energy grid connectivity between Europe and North Africa and Egypt especially. I'll say two other quick points, and it's terrific that we've got Nikos there. And he was just in Washington and made everybody smarter by spending some time with him while he was in DC. But I would just note how Greece and the Mitsotakis government has been ahead of the curve on so many of these issues in terms of regional gas connectivity, important projects that Kostis and I have been working together on for many years, like the FSRU in Alexandroupolis, but also the IGB, of course, the Southern Gas Corridor, gas connections to North Macedonia. The whole energy map of Southeastern Europe is being redrawn right now. And we're going to continue to work together with all of our European partners, but also with important players like Egypt, like Israel, to advance regional energy security. And just to finish, I was really delighted to see the emphasis that Senator Menendez placed on the 3+1 vehicle in his presentation at Delphi yesterday. And I can assure you that this remains a strong priority for the Biden administration in terms of how we elaborate our regional cooperation using the vehicle of the 3+1, using our status as an observer in the East Med Gas Forum, and leveraging a very robust US-EU dialogue on both energy transition and energy security. So thanks for having me with you. The only consolation I have not being with you is that my screensaver on one of my phones is the view down to Galaxy there from Delphi, and I really thank Simeon and everybody else for allowing me to participate remotely in this conversation.
Thank you too. We'll be back for the second question. Let's go to Mr. Mobarez and tell us please how East Med Gas Forum could support and overcome current global challenges. Cooperation, I think it is the case, but please tell us.
Thank you, Maria, very much. It's really a pleasure for me to be among this distinguished panel. It's my first time in Delphi Economic Forum. I'm very excited about what's happening, a lot of things, a lot of sessions, a lot of meetings. Back to your question, I guess the EMGF is a relatively infant organization. Our first ministerial meeting was back in January 2019, so long before the Russia-Ukraine crisis and long before this energy crunch. But I think what happened with the Russia-Ukraine crisis is that it put more emphasis on the East Mediterranean and the EMGF and what it can do in both supporting energy security as well as energy transition. So since our inception, our main objective was that there are several gas discoveries in the region, in Egypt, in Israel, and also in Cyprus, in addition to more potential gas resources. So our objective was how can we get together, how can we collaborate as governments and also as industry and companies to develop these resources to the benefit of the people and also to the benefit of the region. And I guess, as I said, with the war, this put more emphasis on the East Mediterranean. And last year, on one of our ministerial meetings, we witnessed the signing of a famous trilateral MOU between the EU, Egypt, and Israel, with the main objective, two things. First, how can we accelerate gas supplies from the region to the EU to support the diversification of energy? And also, how can we do this in a more responsible way without jeopardizing whether energy security or energy transition? And I believe we can do so. The technology is there, the infrastructure is there, but what we need to do is, again, collaborate together to do this in the right way.
Thank you. Now let's go to European Commission and Mrs. Jørgensen, please tell us what are the strategic priorities of the Commission with respect to the Mediterranean partners and what role can the region play for the European energy security and what can the role of Greece be in that part?
Thank you very much for the invitation and thank you for the very good question. If you allow me to pick up on a few points made by the previous speakers, because I think Ambassador Pyatt, Jeff, very good to see you there on screen. As Ambassador Pyatt has said, we have seen an increasingly close cooperation, including on the energy security and the contribution of the Eastern Mediterranean region. And as Jeff also said, Greece has been playing a leading role, both in terms of the transition, but also the energy security and for the entire region. So I think those are very, very good points to frame the discussion. And as Osama Mobarez said, a very good example of some of that work is indeed the MOU that was signed recently between Egypt, Israel, and the European Commission to frame and accelerate the cooperation both on energy security, but also on the energy transition to make sure that the energy supply from the region is as clean as possible. We are working on reducing methane emissions, for example, and we're working on building a future together around green hydrogen from the region. So they're very good examples of that. I think if I go back to where I'm coming from and the work we're doing in the European Union, then it's clear that together with this region, with the Eastern Mediterranean region, we face the same challenges and we have the same objectives. We need to make sure that we address the climate crisis by a decarbonization of our energy system, and we need to make sure that we can offer secure, affordable, and sustainable energy. And here I think the region has an absolutely critical role, and Greece has a very critical role as an entry point and as a hub for cooperation that is relevant for all of Europe. There are good examples. The recently inaugurated Greece-Bulgaria interconnector, we have been working very, very closely on that, and I think it's a very good example of how the Greek investment into LNG terminals, the Levithousa that came online, and how that can help the entire region stay more energy secure, while at the same time leading the green energy transition through significant investments into renewable energy. Greece is lucky with both wind and sun, and Greece is making good use of that. We saw significant additional capacity coming online last year, and so a good example of a way to secure both more affordable, cleaner, and secure energy to Greece, to the Greek economy, but with relevance for all of Europe and with relevance for the Eastern Mediterranean region.
Thank you. And let's pass to Mr. Nikos Tsafos. And tell us, please, about the importance of Greece as an energy, in the middle of the energy routes, and also as a future gas supplier. And I would like to ask you, first of all, give us an update of the exploration of gas that is going on. And also answer us, do you think that the energy routes in the perspective of the area could lead to a better relations or worse relations with Turkey?
Well, thank you very much for that. Greece has a very specific, expansive and diverse vision for the Eastern Mediterranean. And the key thing is that we see it as a possible pillar for European energy security. And I think the first thing to appreciate in that statement is that the Eastern Mediterranean is already making a significant contribution to our energy security. I was just looking recently at the data that DESFA publishes, and in the first quarter of this year, our #1 LNG supplier is the United States. Our #2 LNG supplier is Egypt. And so the Eastern Mediterranean as a contributor to European energy security is not a thing for the future. It's not something we should be speaking about in the future tense. It's something that's happening already. And there are additional resources in the region, and we think that those can find a way to market and that Greece can be on the receiving end of those resources. At the same time, we have expedited our own exploration program. In reality, when you look at the numbers, we have done more in the last year than all the efforts combined of the last decade. If you look at the seismic area that we covered, it's about 10, 11x, so 10, 11 times more in 1 year than everything that happened from 2013 to 2021. Now we have the data, the companies have the data, they study the data. We will see what conclusions they come to. And so it's premature to reach any conclusions yet. We have to study the data. But we see that the loss of Russian gas in the European marketplace means that some other resources will have to be made available to the European market. And under the right circumstances, if we have positive results, why shouldn't those resources come from Greece? But it's not just an entirely hydrocarbon-based visions for the region. We have talked repeatedly about the great solar and wind potential of particularly Egypt, but not just Egypt. I always like to say there are currently 4 gas pipelines that connect North Africa to Europe. Why shouldn't there be 4 electricity cables that connect North Africa to Europe in the future? And we see that some of those cables could be coming through Greece. And as we develop those projects, we also have to be mindful that we cannot absorb all this electricity. It can play a role in the regional market, and so developing the infrastructure north of us in the Balkans. And so this is an expansive vision, it's a diverse vision, it's a lot of different resources, a lot of different players, and of course it is our hope that the level of commercial collaboration and projects also produces, political dividends, and better relations in the region. That is our hope, and that is always our aspiration.
And about Turkey, did you say something?
Sorry?
Did you answer me about Turkey? Did you just say that it can be a reason for better relation?
Yes.
Okay. It's an optimistic and nice point. And now we go to Mrs. Galli. Talking about energy routes, the role of DESFA is crucial. So please tell us how the investment strategy of DESFA empowers the presence of Greece in the area.
Well, I would not say only DESFA, but of course all of the natural gas infrastructure of Greece are making Greece a very important entry corridor for new sources of energy, and for the time being, of course, new LNG supplies for the region. Let's say, starting already from last year, what is very relevant is that in 1 year, our export have grown over 300%. And that is an extremely significant achievement. As Nikos mentioned, this has made it possible, in particular, through not only the import of Azeri gas to TAP, but also, of course, through the significant volumes of LNG that have arrived in Revitusa from the United States and from Egypt, and of course from all over the world. And not only, let's say, Greece has enabled this significant change in the flows, in the patterns of gas for the present, but many significant investments are being carried out that will enable our export capacity to be multiplied by 4 times by mid-2025. So today we had an export capacity of 2.5 billion cubic meter per year. We will reach 8.5 billion cubic meter. And this will enable, of course, the LNG arriving from Alexandroupolis and, of course, all the other sources of gas to be exported to Bulgaria, to Romania, to Serbia, and potentially eventually also to Moldova and to Ukraine. And, of course, with the new pipeline, the interconnection with North Macedonia that Ambassador Pyatt has so much supported in the past, and the construction will start on the ground later this year. By 2026, also North Macedonia will be able to receive through Greece new sources of supply. All these investments are private investment, and all these investments are made in a moment in which, of course, there is a great need and a great uncertainty. So, of course, we need to look at the role of Greece as an entry corridor for energy, not only in the context of an entry corridor of LNG, but as, let's say, many of the colleagues before me said, as an entry corridor for new sources of energy. And of course there is electricity, but there is also an important role that Greece might play in the future to import hydrogen. There will be a potential for domestic production, but given the proximity to Middle East, also with respect to import of hydrogen for Europe, Greece has a very significant competitive geographical advantage. And in this context, all the investments we are making in the new pipelines are fully hydrogen compliant. And of course, these give us confidence that they will have an utilization in the long run. The other Mediterranean perspective, which I think is very important, is the one of carbon capture and storage. Of course, we are investing in renewables, we are investing in green gases, but we need also to resolve shortly, with a short time horizon, the reduction of emission, and also CCS will be an important contribution. The Mediterranean basin, let's say, on the European shore has limited reservoir available. Greece has one, the Prinos, together with Italy and Ravenna. And so we need to start accelerate this development and establish a cooperation with the other shore of the Mediterranean, where, of course, Egypt has a huge depleted field that in the future can contribute significantly to the decarbonization of the Mediterranean region. So I think we need to look at these infrastructures for the LNG, for the mid-term, but we need also to look at the role they will play, and the Mediterranean will play also for hydrogen and carbon capture and storage.
Yes, right. Thank you. And talking about supply and how Greece can be a route for the north, the other countries of the Balkans, we go to Mr. Sifnaios from GASTRADE. And Mr. Sifnaios, please tell us the role of Greece and how GASTRADE with the new FSRU can help and ameliorate that role.
Slide. So that's perfect. This is my cue. Okay. Okay. Thanks, John. You'll listen to the rest of it?
Yeah.
Obviously.
Of course, we listen to you. Thank you, Marina, to start with for the question. And I think the role of Greece, well, there's a lot of untapped production potential in the East Med, but I think the main thing is what do you do with that? How do you move it around? And that's where Greece comes into play as the entry point for Southeastern Europe, for Central Europe. So from Greece going west to Italy, going north to the Balkans, going north all the way to Hungary, Austria, and further northeast going to Moldova and Ukraine. This is how we see the role of Greece as the entry point both for renewable energy and for gas into Southeastern Europe.
And how GASTRADE and what are the challenges that you see from the moving away from Russian gas to Southeastern Europe? What does it take? What does it take to make the change?
Firstly, let's see. 2022 was a very particular year, and I think probably 2023 will be another one. And you know, obviously after the initial panic of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, Europe had put their act together, and they found themselves to be able to manage to a large extent something which was unpredicted, something that was unknown. So we have seen that the dependence on Russian gas from 2021 to 2022 has dropped to by almost to 1/3, and of course that had to do with some drop in demand, which in a way could be circumstantial because we had a mild winter. There were a lot of governmental measures being taken. We have unfortunately had to reuse some coal and nuclear, and maybe some of these things will not be there. But if you then look further, what are the two ways of basically replacing this on a long-term basis? And it's renewable energy and LNG in my mind. And when we look into Southeastern Europe, particularly including Hungary, we see a region which was traditionally dependent on Russian gas, 60% of it, more or less, with very few alternatives. And then if you actually look at the gap, and you add the potential growth of this market in terms of gas, which has to do with the decommissioning of coal plants, which has to do with further penetration, and then you add Ukraine into that, we're looking at a material gap. And that material gap needs both. It needs both the further penetration of renewables and LNG to be able to basically cover it. And clearly there are some things that we need to do, and maybe there are more, but I think I've put 4 here. We need to invest in selective, and I will focus on gas, of course. We need to think about selective new infrastructure in LNG terminals and interconnectors to make sure we integrate the market, but the timing is now. This is not something for 5 years down the road. This is something for now. So time is very important. The second thing, it's important to make sure that the stakeholders cooperate well together, the TSOs, the governments, the regulators, and one of the initiatives that I see as a very important one is this vertical corridor initiative. Then the third one is to reduce the transportation costs for transition of gas, make energy affordable, and fourth is to be able to establish a regional gas hub so you can effectively trade in the region. And there are, though, also some challenges around here, and I'll mention 2. One is the big jump in costs as a result of the Russian invasion and the war, and we have seen that in many industries, but in energy is really pretty evident, and that could cause delaying or even abandonment of projects. And the second one, which is the growing influence, I think, of a new Russian gas backdoor entry point, let me call it that way, which as Turkey evolves as a regional hub for Russian gas for Europe. So new initiatives which have been increasingly introduced involving Turkey as the main transmission territory towards southeastern Europe. For example, I think this new solidarity ring, which is, I think, a great idea, which has an investment of almost 730 million to improve the systems, which is great. But I think instead we could also increase the export capacity from Greece, and more LNG, more Azeri gas can come into the same region, use this solidarity ring for export purposes into South and Eastern Europe.
Thank you, Mr. Sifnaios. And as we talked about diversification and the need to move away from Russian gas, there is not better example than what happened in Bulgaria. And Mr. Vladimir Malinov, please tell us about the energy security strategy of Bulgaria and what have happened this year. And you changed everything, and how you changed everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before answering to your question and to the panel title itself, I will revert a little bit back to what was said by the previous speakers, and because I had the honor earlier today to speak in a panel which was about energy security and energy transition, because in the role of East Mediterranean, I think that both panels could very good overlap each other. Of course, energy security, Bulgaria was something like a bad from one side, but from the other side, very good example, because we were the first one who suffered from a real cutoff of Russian supplies all of a sudden, okay, without giving some pre-notice. And in fact, one year later, we are fully diversified. We have a zero consumption. Nevertheless, that Russian gas is transported via the territory of Bulgaria. We had a zero consumption of Russian gas covering the domestic consumption. So, which shows us that the world is changing, and that the aggression and the war which Russia is now leading in Ukraine also was something like a driver to us, not just for Bulgaria, but for the whole region, to move faster, to be much more flexible, and to take faster decisions. Because, okay, which shows us that now all the gas flows will start moving from south to north. So the gas map is absolutely different as of, let's say, 1 year and a half ago. So from that perspective, the East Med as a whole will play a significant role in energy security. And the example is that I'm here, it's that we are relying fully on that, but not just for the Bulgaria, but for the whole region. On the other side, of course, we are talking about energy transition, all that, but my, let's say, humble opinion is that the natural gas will stay as a bridge fuel for the upcoming years, achieving our common European Union goals by 2050 to have a full carbon neutrality. But during that time, we should survive and we should rely on natural gas. On that reason, we will go fully relying on gas coming from the LNG terminals. And it's not just words, because I could remember myself, it was maybe like 10 years ago, when the first time I met Dimitris Kapalouzos and coming to my office and trying to advertise a project of LNG in Alexandroupolis. after finishing the meeting, I thought, what are these guys talking about? So we have the pipeline gas, which is much more cheaper. We have 90%, 95% Russian gas. It's something like coming from a high future. But on the other side, we also are visionaries, because 4 years ago, when took the final decision to invest in the terminal, we were clever enough. So we are relying on the region.
Thank you. And let's go back to Mr. Pyatt. Can you hear us? Mr. Pyatt? We don't have... No. Okay. So let's go to you, Mrs. Jørgensen, and we talked about the need for energy security and the gap between supply and demand of gas. Are you afraid that we are going to see a repetition
Ambassador
of
Pyatt
energy
has left.
this winter?
I sent a note he had to depart
At this
for a
time,
meeting
at this moment,
urgently.
the price of gas is low.
So if it's
But,
okay.
this, as we all know, depends on the level of supply and the level of demand. So what are your expectations for next month?
Thank you very much. I think the crisis is, in fact, ongoing. So rather than looking at a repetition of a crisis, I would say a continuation of the crisis. And I think most market analysts expect the crisis to continue because there's not significant additional supply coming online globally. And so we need to be prepared for that. And because Russia, as other speakers have said, has removed essentially close to 100 billion cubic meters of natural gas, not just from Europe, but from global markets, because this was pipeline gas that has nowhere else to go. So the global markets were disrupted by that Russian weaponization of natural gas and weaponization of energy. When I look into the next winter, yes, we do expect the crisis, the challenges to continue. We expect that there will be security of supply risks. And we know that a number of factors influencing that are outside our control. How will demand in Asia develop, for example? That will impact global markets, and that's not something we can influence. There are significant security risks out there that we also have limited influence on. But what we have done within the European Union together is to establish the instruments that are necessary for us to be prepared for a continued crisis. So we have diversified supplies, and I think what Vladimir just said, when Bulgaria was one of the first to be cut off completely from a full dependence on Russia, just a few weeks after that, we all met in Sofia with all the countries in the region to look at, well, what is a possible response to that? How can we work together? How can we as a European Union help Bulgaria, but also how can countries in the region work together? And the acceleration and the inauguration of the Bulgaria-Greece interconnector is a very good example of an operational, concrete project that has helped secure energy and helped make sure that these new trade flows, no longer from east to west, but from south to north, that they actually function. So those infrastructure investments have helped us prepare for the next winter. The other aspect is our reduction of demand. And again, that is one of the aspects in our control. The European Union collectively reduced demand for natural gas significantly since last summer, around 20%. Greece is in fact one of the leaders on that, both because significant levels of renewables came online, but also because of demand-saving measures. So we have, I think, given ourselves the instruments that mean that we are better prepared for this continued crisis, better prepared for next winter. Our gas storage is full around 58%, which is a first ever at this time of year. So we are better prepared, but we still need to continue these efforts to diversify, to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy, and to save energy through energy efficiency and saving measures.
As it's about the measure that Europe taken, I would like a comment also for the new platform, the Aggregate EU. Do you think that this can lead to better prices?
I'm very glad you raised that, because that is one of the initiatives we have taken over this past year, is to look at what role can we what role can the European Union play, what can we better do together to strengthen our market position, to help stabilize global markets, to create more transparency in markets, and to make better use of the union, of being together and of the shared objectives. And so the energy platform, the Aggregate EU that went online just a few days ago, and the efforts towards joint purchasing is an important instrument in that context. There are many advantages to this instrument, and one is that it gives a better access to smaller buyers and for smaller buyers that could otherwise find difficulties accessing global markets. Large consumers, for example, would typically have to go through traders and would see quite significant price increases resulting from that. And so we do create a better opportunity, better access to the market, and better access to customers for suppliers. So our assessment is that over time, it can indeed help stabilize prices and secure supply to customers that would otherwise be at risk. Now, it is a completely new endeavor. It is a completely new instrument. It hasn't been done before. So I think so far, so good. We went online, as I said, the 25th of April on Aggregate EU. We now have the tenders coming out there. And so we hope to see continued high levels of subscription and interest. I note that several Greek companies have joined this effort, and this is very, very good news in order for this to take off and have a real impact on markets.
So you say that it can be effective, maybe long term, not immediately.
Well, it is already online. It's already
yes,
happening, but it's too early to assess the impact.
Yes, I see. So let's go back to Mr. Mobarez, and please give us your estimation about the impact that the East Gas area could have on the general supply of the gas market when, if we have new discoveries in Greece and based on the discoveries that we already have in Egypt, Israel, and Cyprus. And also your comment about the need for East Med gas pipeline. You think it's needed, or there are other alternatives? And where is that project?
Thank you. So I think maybe the production now from the East Med is not significant as big players, but as the previous speaker said, during the past year, Israel and Egypt were able to scale up the production and the export of LNG to substitute some of the other suppliers. And it's not just the existing production and the existing discoveries, but there is a lot of potential for yet to find gas. There are several reports, some of them USGS Geological Survey reports said that the region has maybe around 300 TCF of gas yet to be found. This is definitely significant volumes. And yes, conscious about the decarbonization or the energy transition, that's why we're not just working on monetizing the gas, but also how can, as I said, how can we produce it in a more responsible way? Doing a lot of the decarbonization, also introducing CCS as Maria was talking about, and also the hydrogen in the loop, so that the East Med can provide not just gas, but cleaner gas, and also other clean energy resources. And it's not just Egypt and Israel. Cyprus has already discoveries. More discoveries were discovered recently. Recently, Greece has been quite active with the upstream, and hopefully there will be more resources, in addition to Lebanon and hopefully other countries as well in the region. And for monetizing and evacuating this gas, we're working as EMGF and also with our member countries and partners on short and medium and long term. So the short term is that utilizing the existing infrastructure, which in this case, the LNG facilities in Egypt, which has a capacity of around 17 to 18 BCM per year. And still, it's not fully utilized. That's why part of the trilateral MOU signed, how can we accelerate this? Whether production coming from Israel, coming from Egypt, and extra volumes from Egypt, or using renewables in Egypt, more renewables, and thus freeing up more gas, in addition also to Israel. So this is for the short term. For the medium term, the potential option is that maybe expanding the existing LNG, because The LNG in Egypt can be, it's 17, 18 BCM, but it can be tripled. It can go up to more than 50 BCM. In the longer term, with more findings, more gas resources, we can already have several reports that we have done through the past 2 years discussing several other options, whether LNG elsewhere or other pipelines. East Med pipeline is one of these options, but each option you have pros and cons, you have some challenges. It has to be technically feasible, it has to be economically feasible, and I think most importantly, it has to be politically also feasible. So that's why we are weighing the options, but we're working on short term, because as the previous question was about what would happen 2023, 2024. So this is our focus now. How can we accelerate, especially for the shorter term?
I see. Thank you. Let's go back to Ms. Galli. And talking about prices and the gap of supply and demand, please share with us your expectation about for this winter and for the market, the gas market, and Greece, of course, and the Greek energy security strategy that we should follow in order to be safe this year and not to be anxious about enough gas, if we have enough gas.
Well, I think as Mr. Jørgensen said before, the market is still very tight. So it's clear that we are going to see during the summer probably reasonably low prices. And this is mainly driven by the fact that the storages are full at a very good level, and also that the Asian demand is not growing so much, and so that China and the other Asian countries are well covered by long-term contracts. So in this moment, we see a summer which can be quite let's say, I wouldn't say relaxed, but with the prices still a little bit higher than in the past. But and then we enter in, and then we have a period probably after 25, 26, in which we have many new LNG production terminal coming on stream. So we can, let's say, if we look forward a couple of years, we should also come back to a more balanced supply-demand market, so a better equilibrium on the supply and the demand in the world. So it's the period in between that, of course, is the more uncertain. And given this uncertainty, where many other factors that can be temperature-related, drought, rain, so hydro, nuclear in France. So we have probably to continue to do what has been done in the recent past, and that is store gas. So like in any situation, when you have the risk of not having a commodity, if you have available that commodity already stored, of course, this creates the security that help you navigate through these uncertain times. We also have to consider that even if Greece has been relatively protected by the big uncertainty, because we didn't have curtailment of gas, but price-wise, we follow the same dynamic of the rest of Europe, because at the end, most of our LNG import and pipe import are indexed to the European hubs. Even if maybe our supply-demand balance is not so linked with TTF, but still we buy TTF index gas or PSV. And so thinking about using the storage in an effective manner now that the prices are low, it's something that not only protect from availability, but also help, let's say, flattening a bit the uncertainty with vis-a-vis the prices. So I think that within the overall European strategy, also Greece needed to consider that, let's say, storing gas, and even if can be sometimes a bit expensive, perceived expensive because we are storing it abroad, is a very important tool that needs to be activated.
But we do that now that the gas is has low price. Do we store gas this period?
Well, this depends much on the, let's say, the players in the market. It's their choice. So, of course, that would be, if I would have the possibility, that would be what I would be doing, storing a gas now.
What do you suggest?
That I would suggest. And of course, the second consideration, as has been said, optimize the use of infrastructure. And in this respect, of course, the cooperation with all the other infrastructure players, the other LNG terminals, our neighboring TSO, we have recently done together an introduction of a possible market text, the better utilization of the capacity in the Balkans to import LNG is another way to mitigate the risk of prices, because the more routes we have and the more transparent available capacity we have, the better it is to mitigate price volatility.
Right. And let's go to Mr. Sifnaios to update us with the news from LNG terminal and the late Thrace LNG terminal, which will be ready to operate in 25. And tell us about the role that they will play when they will be ready.
Yeah, I think Alexandroupolis LNG terminal, which I'm really happy to have two of my shareholders here, is progressing. Of course, we are facing the major increase in our budget, which we're trying to cope with. We are, our target and our objective is to be ready to operate in the beginning of next year. And I think it's the most important new project infrastructure for and in the area. It really provides a diversification of suppliers and routes, and enhances the security of supply for the region. And if you look at the different players which have vested interest, either shareholders or as users, Serbia. Recently we signed with North Macedonia, Romania. You can see how energy can be a tool for cooperation and solidarity. It is positioning actually Greece in the forefront of the strategic developments in the region as a reliable leader in the region. Now, LNG Thrace, which is the second FSRU that GASTRADE has a license for, aims to further expand further north, basically with an aim to get us to Ukraine. And I think this would be possible and if it's coupled with more investments in export capacity. So I think it's very important to push export capacity from Greece to the north. Now, together, these two terminals with Revithousa can form the supply pillars for the vertical corridor and capturing the full complementarity of the potential and the existing infrastructures in the area. Now, talking about other FSRUs, well, I can only talk about ours, but I think there is a gap to be covered. As I said, this gap will be a combination between more penetration of renewable energy and more LNG. But eventually, we've done our cost benefits analysis, we've seen our market, we're investing in it. I suppose the other ones have to do the same. And the market will determine how many FSRUs can be operational.
Thank you. And let's go back to Mr. Malinov. You are one of the shareholders, as we heard, for GASTRADE. You have 20%. Tell us why you did it and what is your expectation from this investment?
As I mentioned in my previous speech, because we were visionaries and let's say the previous shareholders were very aggressive in convincing us. But being one of the last speakers, I would like to make a small bridge between what was said by the previous one. Ditte, it's up to you just to let you know that Bulgarian storage was 77% filled at the beginning of the injection season. And the good news which is coming from yesterday is that because we had an auction for the rest of the capacity, all the capacity is already booked for the entire season. So what we're expecting that at the end of the injection season, we will have 100% full storage. It is also make a reference to what Maria mentioned, but also to the place where we're here, because around 20% of that capacity will be going to be booked and reserved by the Greek companies, which will have a good example of the cooperation between transborder and not dealing like separate countries, but solidarity and cooperation. Second message which I would like to convey to Kostis what is mentioned. And thanks once again to the European Commission for supporting the expansion of the underground storage, which will be used for the whole region. But second is about the Solidarity Ring, which is also a project which we had the chance a week ago to discuss on a CESIC level, also very good, supportive. The Solidarity Ring is opened. Solidarity Ring is not just a project for one primary resource, of course, which will be the Azeri gas. But Solidarity Ring is open also for the LNG, which will come from Greece. And that's the reason I think that whenever we have the source which will come from Greece as an LNG, we highly would like to get Greece on board, and not just Greece, but also DESFA as a system, and the future FSRUs or existing ones, and Freixo is one good example which could serve for that. And this will be also part of the speech which my president is maybe right now delivering. So Nikos, you may check with your Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis if it's the same. And finally, when we are going to speak about, because this is the panel, the role of ISMED, we are strongly relying on diversification and on the security of supply to Greece on some other sources. Because the project which our government and we as a Bulgartranz, but with another hat, maybe will be involved. This is the pipeline for the crude oil, which is going to secure the crude oil for our refinery. It's from a vital importance. Ditte very, very well knows that we have some derogation, but which expires 5th of December 2024, which is actually tomorrow. So, and the role of the ISMED and Greece also in this diversifying another fossil fuel, but also which will stay in the upcoming years, is of a great importance. So we are really neighbors, and when you have a problem, first what you're doing is knocking on the neighbor door.
We ran out of time, and I leave the close remarks to Mr. Tsafos because I owe you one question, and please finish that interesting discussion commenting on the energy security measures that we have to take for this winter. You think that it was right what we did last year and we have to do the same, or there's any diversification that we have to do this time?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I want to echo what Ditte and others have said. You know, we are in a much better position today than we were 6 months ago, than we were a year ago. But there's no way to be complacent. I don't think we can sit back and, you know, declare victory. It's too soon for that. I think what we did last year was all of the above. We reduced our consumption. In Greece, we reduced it by 19% on the whole year, versus 13% in Europe. We reduced our electricity consumption by 6.7% versus 3.1% in Europe. So deeper reductions in both gas and electricity consumption in Greece relative to the European average. So we need to continue to find ways to conserve energy while also, of course, supporting consumers as needed. And we need to also you know, continue to be able to attract the gas supply that we need. You know, we have seen a huge shift in our system from pipeline gas. You know, 5 years ago, 60–70% of the gas was pipeline gas from Russia. If you look last year, what actually came into Greece physically, it was closer to 15%. I mean, some of it was brought in and exported, but if you look at what came into the country. So we've seen a massive shift. And so our primary concern going into the winter is trying to understand, you know, can we continue to operate that system? Do we need to store more gas? As Ms. Galli said, I think that's quite crucial to find the right amount to store to our neighbors. But I think the real lesson that we learned over the last year is you cannot think of energy security in purely national terms. Right? We have to think about our energy security and how we're interconnected with the other markets, right? Bulgaria's gas gets cut off, that impacts us. We are able to bring in LNG, that helps Bulgaria. So we cannot just be thinking about how can we be increasing our national security, although that's obviously our paramount concern, but we have to do that within the context of a system in which we operate. So we feel sort of good about the position we're in. Renewable energy was a lifesaver last year, the growth in renewables. We're still seeing growth this year. And so we're going to be vigilant, we're going to be flexible as we were last year, but I think that we're going into this winter sort of in a much better position than we were last year. So it's our hope that that remains the case.
Okay, thank you very much. So what we keep from this panel is that we need cooperation in order to have a good perspective from the East Gas area, East Med Gas area, and that we are in a better position than last year, depending on concerning the gas prices and the energy security. So thank you very much, all of you, and let's hope to see you all next year here again. Thank you.